Okay.
So hi Rod, good morning. Thank you.
Morning to you. Morning to you, Clem. How are you?
Yeah,
All
lovely.
right?
Thank you. Good.
Good.
Nice to have you back. I've just been recapping over the last conversations. I don't know if some people might be watching those and sort of just switching on into this one straight away. And hopefully today we're just going to cover some of the questions that came up last time. We might recap the life review that we chatted through and sort of we're going to talk about what's next, what happens next, what are people's experience further along. And then we'll talk about, we'll see where the conversation goes. I've got lots of questions that I want to ask you.
I love it. I love it.
And we'll just dive in and see where it goes. Sound good?
Let the spirit lead. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Last time we talked about the life review, sort of various different, like the sequence of events that is commonplace for people that have NDE experiences. So whether that's the tunnel, seeing loved ones, going like seeing Jesus sometimes, and sometimes having a life review. And we talked about that, experiencing how we make others feel as an experiential thing. So when we share love, receiving that back tenfold, 20-fold. But when we're mean, horrible, evil, receiving that back, like feeling what that person feels. So sort of a natural consequence and perfect
justice, because no person can blame anybody but themselves. Perfect justice, isn't it?
And having that light being sometimes Jesus with you, unconditionally sort of supporting and understanding you through that, and helping you understand even sometimes why you did that thing.
And also helping you understand why other people did mean things, which is interesting, because a lot of people who have been, they said they've been abused by people, when they found out what that person had been through, they understood, and it was easy for them to forgive. So again, there's so many perspectives to this.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we talked about the life review, and then some of the questions I left open were, we talked about Hitler or someone with a particularly nasty life, and what that might look like for them, and what next, sort of what where do we go after that? Is it black and white?
No.
Yeah. What's your take on that? You sort of left.
No. Yeah, Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. Well, the original word mansion means dwelling places. So ultimately, if we all went to the same place, there wouldn't be many mansions. There'd be one dwelling place. So we're all at different stages. So ultimately, at the end of your life review, you're going to come to a decision of what you need to learn, what you've done wrong, and so you're going to go to where it suits you. So ultimately, if you've been really, really, really horrible, as Howard Storm said, the people whom he come across, they were exactly where they should be.
Right. So this leads me to so Howard Storm, he had an amazing experience. I have actually flagged a bit of his book to read. So I was thinking, how does it, so he went to a dark place. So people are going where they
belong,
where they feel they belong.
Where they feel, I mean, the New Agers would call it vibrations, call it what you like, vibrations. You're going to go, because if God allowed you to go to the light, that would be hell for them. So it's more merciful for him to let them stay in the dark till they can become progressively into the light, because if they went into the light, it might destroy them. Because as you remember, directly Howard started talking about Jesus and God, they started to run away. They couldn't cope. So they were disappearing back into the darkness. So ultimately, it wouldn't be mercy to put them into the light. It would actually be hell. If that makes sense.
He maybe shall I start by reading his story? Actually, it's quite a nice way to start, isn't it? So I'm just going to read from his book. This is Howard Storm, My Descent into Death. He's someone that had a particularly interesting experience where he went to a dark place, a horrible place, and called out. So I'm just going to read that. It's a bit long, but I think it's worth it. And then it sets lots of conversation off. So he's died, well, he's near dying, and he's lying there. He's gone to this dark place. He's had a horrific time there. Lying there, torn apart inside and out, I knew I was lost. I'd never see the world again. I was left alone to become a creature of the dark. Then, for the first time in my adult life, a very old tune from my childhood started going through my head. It was my voice, but it sounded like I was a little boy singing the same line over and over again. The child that I had once been was singing full of innocence, trust, and hope. Jesus loves me, na, na, na. There was only that bit of the tune and those few words that I could remember. We'd sung those words in Sunday school when I was a child. Somewhere out there in that vast darkness, there could be something good. There is someone who might love me. I didn't have any theological interest about what it meant. It was just a spontaneous recollection from my Sunday school days, growing up in church. Jesus loves me, Jesus loves me. I desperately needed someone to love me and know I was alive. A ray of hope began to dawn in me, a belief that there really was something greater out there. For the first time in my adult life, I wanted it to be true that Jesus loved me. I didn't know how to express what I wanted and needed, but every bit of my last ounce of strength, I yelled out in the darkness, Jesus, save me. I yelled for that from the core of my being with all the energy I had left, and I never meant anything more strongly in my life. Far off in the darkness, I saw a pinpoint of light, like the faintest star in the sky. I wondered why I hadn't seen it before. The star was rapidly getting brighter and brighter, and at first I thought it might be something, but not someone. It was moving towards me at an alarming rate. As it came closer, I realized I was right in its path and I might be consumed by its brilliance. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The light was more intense and more beautiful than I had ever seen. It was brighter than the sun, brighter than a flash of lightning. Soon the light was upon me. I knew that while it was indescribably brilliant, it wasn't just light, it was a living being, a luminous being, approximately 8 feet tall, surrounded by an oval of radiance. The light penetrated my body, ecstasy sweeping away the agony. Tangible hands and arms gently embraced me and lifted me up. I slowly rose up into the presence of the light, and the torn pieces of my body miraculously healed before my eyes. All my wounds vanished. I became whole and well in the light. More importantly, the despair and pain were replaced by love. I'd been lost, but now I was found. I had been dead, but now I was alive. I mean, I could keep reading all day, but I think that's probably... So what actually then happened is he had his life review after that, didn't he?
Yes, he went forward with the angels and Jesus, and they were around him, and they went through his life review then. So
I'm wondering if people say Hitler, for example, do they go into this dark place that they're matching, and then if they hold themselves there because they can't face the life review, like they can't face.
Correct. Yeah, and it's a progressive. I mean, ultimately, a lot of those people who were attacking Howard may not have had a life review.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, they were running away from the light. Prime example, when you get hauntings, a lot of people are actually earthbound. They're wandering around, can't figure out, because remember when Howard first died, he was got up in the hospital bed and he was talking to his wife and she ignored him because she didn't see him. And then he was talking to another patient who ignored him, and he thought, why is everybody ignoring me? And then he looked in the bed and he thought, that looks very much like me. And so ultimately, if he'd have wandered around down here, he could have been wandering literally forever and ever because there's no time. So he would be earthbound. Right. So ultimately, they don't even get. So when you're doing it, if you do a deliverance ministry, you're actually going to try and get the person or the spirit to go into the light.
Right. Okay. So, and that's just because it's an extension of how they experience life.
Yeah. I mean, if you get a very violent death like a suicide, they can be earthbound. a murder, somebody's murdered very quickly, or even someone who doesn't believe there's life after death. They can't get their head around it. They can actually be wandering
Almost
around.
like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
refusal.
A refusal, and so ultimately they think they were physical beings, but they were actually spiritual beings having a physical experience. So ultimately they couldn't relate to being spirit because they no, it doesn't exist. So it can take a long time. They can be wandering around. So often you get this. I've actually dealt with one or two of these things. So yeah, they can
stubborn, almost like a stubborn denial.
Oh yeah.
Of what's happening or where you can go.
Yes.
But so yeah, so they could be staying in that dark place until you accept or are happy to, to go to the light.
They've got literally all the time in the world because they're in a non-time dimension. It could be like 1 minute or 1,000 years. If you're trying to get some idea, one day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, the Bible says. So they could be hanging around there until they actually going to come towards the light.
So they're coming towards the light's part. So how much is accepting God or the light, or because obviously Howard Storm had a bit of a church background as a child, and then
that was the seed that actually helped
it the rest of his life. But someone that hadn't had that might not have heard of Jesus, for example.
No, exactly.
It wouldn't be their culture, but they would still be accepting of the light, the God.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, remember, after we're dead, the Bible teaches we are judged by our works, and Paul says it. A lot of Christians don't like that idea, but the Bible says we are judged by our works. So Jesus saves us, but then, like Howard, what have you done with your life? I've been nasty there. The life review is being judged by your works.
Right. Okay. But there's still an element of there's still an element of accepting that there is an art, like accepting that there's more, accepting God. So there is like equal amounts of both, really.
Yeah. I mean, there's if you get a relationship with God now, like you have, we've already got that relationship. So when you die, you're not going to be wandering around going, oh, what's going on? You're going to actually say, yeah, this is a procedure. It's like if someone goes to a country and then you sit down with them, and you say, what was it like in Australia? And we have a long chat. So, oh yeah, this is a good place. Sydney's a good place. Sydney Opera House. And then I went and saw the Aboriginals and all this. You go, oh, that is really good. And then you turn up in Australia, you would have a good idea where you go. Oh yeah, I want to go to the Sydney Opera House. If you've never heard of Australia and hadn't spoken to anybody in Australia or had a relationship, you're just going to end up there and say, where am I?
Right, literally lost. Yeah.
Literally lost, because you don't know where you are. You don't know what it's like. You haven't got a clue, and you've not had a spiritual upbringing. It's a shock.
Oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah. That's why God,
whole different perspective.
Relationship now. He wants a relationship now. So when we go home, the prodigal son, and hey, let's get the party going.
And you don't waste all that time being lost.
You got it. I mean, you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to do what I want, and I'll just before I die, I'll turn to God." God will not be mocked. And so, what have you gained? Nothing. So you can't really do it that way.
So what would you say would be the experience for that person? Because they know who to call out to. They know they might even like.
It would be similar to Howard Storm's. It'd be very similar to Howard Storm.
Because the state of their heart wouldn't allow them. Because actually, that's something that he said. Actually, Jesus said in his life review to Howard Storm, even though he had called out to Jesus and transformed, obviously, and having his life review, he said, "You're not ready for heaven." Like
exactly.
So that's why he came back.
Exactly. He had to come back to get ready for heaven. I mean, the word hell means absence of God. So those people are in the dark, the absence of God. And that's why when the light comes, they started running and screaming and shouting and disappearing. Because every time Howard actually said Jesus' name or God's name, he realized they were getting further and further away. They just couldn't cope with it. They couldn't cope with him. So it's going to take perhaps, I don't know how long, till they progressively, if ever, they will come to God.
it's such a switch of how you view it, isn't it? So it's not like, it's a punishing, angry God. It's literally they can't bear his
God is
love.
no,
They can't bear his light. Like
100% right. You've hit the nail on the head. God's not punishing them. God's loving them. God's saying, "Come on, guys, come in." He says, "I stand at the door and knock."
Right.
If there are people here on this earth who are anti-God,
so even
when they go over, it'll be identical. They'll be anti-God at this very moment. When they move over, they don't become, "Oh, I'm not anti-God." As Howard found out, you're going to go, "Oh, I'm still anti-God," like they were. There's no God. There's no God. They kept saying to him.
So someone that's got a very loving, serving heart.
Yes. Yes.
But hasn't ever heard of God.
Yeah.
Or hasn't ever, or even denies that part of life. Maybe they have some past trauma that has made them reject the idea of God.
The Bible says, "By their fruits you will know them," or Jesus said, "By their fruits you will know them." Now, when he said that, he didn't say, "By their fruits you will know Christians." He said,
he said, "There'll be those that prophesied in my name and cast demons out in my name, but I will not know them."
You've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I could say, "Oh, I'm a Christian," but I could live like a really nasty. So when I get there, he's not going to say, "Oh yeah, come in, well done."
Yeah.
He's saying, "Your fruits were not good,"
and you're physically won't be
exactly.
Like, vibrationally, it is a helpful word to understand. Yeah, wouldn't be able to.
Because my fruit, I wouldn't have any fruits, and he'd say, and I'd say, "Oh yeah, but I prophesied and that, as you say." He'd say, "Didn't know you." Well, this is really, something worth thinking through.
So on that, a story that I found really helpful for understanding that was, if you're happy to share, we have asked her permission, but your wife Caroline, so she had an experience. She was, all your God stuff was rubbish, didn't she?
Oh yeah.
Her own words.
Yeah.
But then she had an experience. Can you explain that? Because I think when I understood that, I really understood how it would. She helped me understand how it could hurt. Facing the light physically.
Yeah, exactly. If I can go a little bit back for a little bit.
Yeah, do what you.
It's quite humorous, and it shows that God's got a sense of humor too, because she used to say about when we first met. Obviously, she was an atheist, so she called it a G count. So it was, don't talk about God at a certain time. So we were, where the house is. So we went out into the garden. I had a cup of tea. She had a cup of tea, and she was smoking them days. Which is massive change, isn't it? And to the right, where you were camping, they had a big marquee, massive marquee. This is before the campsite opened, and so we walked out there. And I remember she had a cigarette and we're drinking her tea. And all of a sudden, these voices come over from the marquee, "Our God reigns," singing "Our God reigns." And I looked at her, she looked at me, I said, "I've said nothing." It was, I'd love to got that on film. And I had to laugh because I said, because the God count had been there. We walked out and then, "Oh, God reigns." That was really funny, that was. So that was worth knowing, that little bit. And then so her dad became very ill. And I'd spoken about Trevor Deering, whom I had my experience.
Okay. Yeah.
The radio and all that.
First story, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd been talking about that, and so she actually said she wanted to go and see Trevor Deering with her dad, and I wasn't meant to go on that day because I was going to go with her, but I got up and it had rained all night, and I got up at my house, and my house was flooded, and didn't know where the water was coming from. It wasn't coming from the rain, and all the carpets were flooded. So I can't believe it. So I rang her up and said, "I can't go on." So Caroline, I said, "My house is flooded." So she said, "All right, then I'll go on my own." Well, I wasn't meant to go. God works in ways that are not always comfy. And so she went, and when she got there, she saw Trevor Deering. She got there before the service because she said her dad was sort of a bit of a shy man. And so they took him into the back room and they were praying with him and his wife. And Caroline thought, she looked up and there's this blinding light. And then she saw steps coming down, and then the roof disappeared. She could look straight up, and there was this light, and she felt dirty, utterly dirty, and she wanted to get away from the light.
Mm.
Light was painful. It didn't make her feel. It was incredible, but it made her feel. It made her feel dirty. That's the word she used. She felt dirty. It gives you some idea how these other spirits out there were scared to come into the light. If she'd have had to go further and further and further in, it would have been torture.
So what happened? So
then, obviously everything changed. But I didn't know, because I was still home at my house. There's all light coming down on you, and see all beams of light. Yeah. And she didn't tell me. She rang me up that night. I knew there was something a bit unusual, and I said, "Are you all right?" She, "Oh yeah," but she didn't talk. And I thought, well, perhaps it's because, you know, a dad and so forth. And about 2 days later, I was over here, and I stood in the kitchen, and she was getting some food, and she was still very quiet. And I said, "You're right." And she just turned around and said, "I'm a Christian." And I looked and I said, "You what?" She said, "I'm a Christian." But the worst bit of it is that she told a friend of mine before she told me. And I said, "Why was that?" She said, "Because you would have turned around and said, 'I told you so.'" So,
humbling herself.
And it's so interesting that Trevor Deering was the catalyst each time.
Oh right, I hadn't picked up on that because I hadn't heard that story that time.
Yeah, there's a 30-year gap between when I was sort of converted at that time, and then all those years afterwards, she went and got in touch with Trevor Deering, and she had her experience. That was incredible.
Amazing. And I remember her saying something like, I can't ever describe the words she used, but like it felt like it was almost burning up the darkness in her, like I need to keep ask her that word, but sort of
because ultimately God is fire. God is the burning bush. It was God. So you got the fire. And so when they talk about burning in hell, it's not literal as I see it, because when you get near God, he burns you. It burns it away. I mean, it's like
that's really,
if you think about it, what was it? Let me just try and think this. Brimstone was used to cleanse things. We used to cleanse things in the Bible times with brimstone. It was like carbolic soap.
Right.
It cleans things up, and fire would clean things up. So fire and brimstone were cleansing. So if someone that you hear people say, "Oh, you fire and brimstone," it's not a negative. Brimstone was used to clean up. It's like carbolic soap to cleanse you. It was a positive, not a negative. And sadly, a lot of people are driven away from Christianity because they hear this fire and brimstone preaching, and fire and brimstone was a cleansing.
Oh wow! That's interesting.
When they talk about burning, Jesus, I mean, Gehenna was one of the things that was used for hell. It was a tip in Jerusalem where they used to burn all the rubbish.
So he's using that as a metaphor.
Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
So when he was symbolically saying, like, all the rubbish is going to be put in and burnt, like you would talk about banging your head against the wall if someone didn't. There's a lot of symbolism in the Aramaic language. So and then when it comes to us, by the time it reached us, we got a God with a big stick who's throwing people into a fire and enjoying it.
Chinese whisper.
That's not at all. Well, you've only got to look at Jesus.
Well, there's this parable that I read yesterday, and I don't think it's an accident that it came out in my reading plan yesterday. And it's the same. So it's the parable of the rich man Lazarus. And I thought I was wanting to get your take on it. So if I read it, I think it sort of touches on the life review stuff, like what matters most, and this dark place and light place. So I'll read it. And then, so there was a rich man who used to dress in purple and fine linen and feast magnificently every day. And at his gate there used to lie a poor man called Lazarus, covered in sores, who longed to fill himself with what fell from the rich man's table. Even dogs came and licked his sores. Now it happened that the poor man died and was carried away by angels into Abraham's embrace. The rich man also died, and he was buried. In his torment in Hades, he looked up and saw Abraham a long way off with Lazarus in his embrace. So he cried out, Father Abraham, pity me, send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames. Abraham said, my son, remember that during your life you had your fill of good things, just as Lazarus has had his fill of bad. Now he is being comforted here while you're in agony. But that's not all. Between us and you is a great gulf. A great gulf has been fixed to prevent those who want to cross from our side to yours or from your side to ours. Yeah. So Abraham, just for those that would be a man, exactly. He's a man that died. He's not an angel or a light being.
Ultimately, we're back to where we were. Like we're talking about Howard. You had the dark. They couldn't come over. They were running away, and you had the light.
And there's this gulf, because you've talked about it being more separate. So here, good and evil exists together, sort of dilute it down.
Exactly.
It's very separate.
You can't have demons running around in heaven. So there's a complete cut off. Where here, in this world, you can. There's many evil people out in this world doing terrible things.
And talking of like the cooling water on his tongue and the flames is exactly what you just talked about. Exactly. So Jesus is telling this story.
Yes.
And so obviously this would have been an experience before Jesus. So
yeah, because you say it was a parable. So he was teaching a principle in the parable that, and it really does show up the life of you, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't say anything about the religion of the poor man or what he did. Yeah, it's literally.
See, God isn't really into religion, I don't believe. He's into love, because God is love. So religion is man-made. Now, Christianity is a relationship with Jesus. A lot of people say, oh, it's a religion, but when you look back, they were called the people of the way.
Yeah.
They weren't called Christians. So the way was the way Jesus taught. So they followed the way. Jesus was the way. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And they followed him. Then when the word Christians came in, that was meant as an insult initially. In the early days, they called them Christians. And it stuck, and today it's not an insult. It's, we call ourselves Christians, but it ultimately was meant as a bit of an insult because they were the people of the way.
So again, it's finding this middle ground. So it's not saying all religions are the same, and all the same thing, because it's about Jesus.
About Jesus,
and love.
Yes.
And but it's also
Jesus is a follower of Jesus, and to follow Jesus, to become a disciple of Jesus, is to be like him, to mimic him. To do the things Jesus done. To love, to care, to sacrifice. And that's why if you say, "Oh, I'm following Jesus," but you go there on Sunday and live like the devil for 6 days and go back on Sunday, you say, "I never knew you," because you didn't have a relationship.
Hate others from different religions.
Oh yeah. Jesus
still hate in your heart.
When we talked about the Good Samaritan, I mean, the Samaritans were looked down. We don't want anything to do with the Samaritans. So there's a prime example where he was basically saying, the Good Samaritan came along, somebody who was looked down on and done the good works. And the priest, he walked by, didn't he?
Yeah.
He walked by and just said, "Oh, bless you, my son." But the Good Samaritan, he had the fruits, and he bathed him, took him to an inn, said, "Look after him." Who was the best out of those two? The priest or the Samaritan, who people looked down on? So it was, you will know them by their fruits. We're back to that again.
There's one I've just tagged to do with the religion aspect. I think Betty Eady drew my attention to this in the Bible. It's in Luke, and that last one was in didn't say it was in Luke as well, Luke 16, but this is in Luke 9. So John spoke up, "Master," he said, "we saw someone driving out devils in your name, and because he's not with us," which would be in our
In our little group. Yeah.
We tried to stop him, but Jesus said to him, you must not stop him. Anyone who is not against you is for you.
Exactly.
So being against you would be hated, like hurting, being evil, basically.
Oh yeah. Being against you with people like, antichrist. If someone is using Jesus' name to heal people, they're obviously not anti, they're pro. So, but they might not be in. I use the word church. You might at that time they weren't with the disciples.
Yeah.
The disciples saw them. Hey, you shouldn't be doing that. And Jesus was saying, "Oh no, if they're not against us, they're for us. If they're doing the works of God." Although I think I said last time, didn't I, about the joke where the atheist turns up in heaven with St. Peter, and he said, I think I told you this one, didn't I, last time? Yeah, where he said, I wasn't a Christian, but he said, no, but you live like one. And I think that's the most important bit. Not what you say you are, but what you actually do by your fruits. Back to fruits again.
So, talk about that. The one that came up when I was thinking around this as well was the criminal that was on the cross.
Yes.
Next to Jesus, who obviously had I'm guessing had a bad state of heart, because he's doesn't necessarily mean he's not up there wrongly like Jesus, but and yet he received he knew that Jesus was God, so he was accepting God. He said, and he said, I'll see you in paradise. So there is an element
you will be me in paradise.
His heart was changed in that moment, I guess.
Yeah. And as Jesus said,
it can be an instantaneous thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Howard Storm was nearly instantaneous. It wasn't that long, was it, before Jesus started holding him? So you see, one thing I found with their near-death experiences, all the people who have gone into a hellish experience, directly they call out to God or Jesus, they're saved. Directly. So that means if they'd have called out genuinely to God or Jesus before they died, they wouldn't have gone through the darkness, would they? Because if they had a relationship with God, because directly Jesus had the relationship with Howard went into the light.
Yeah. So it's all, it's like saving you from.
Yeah, Ian McCormack. Yeah, Ian McCormack, the jellyfish man, you might have heard. Again, directly he called out to Jesus. Again, he was taken. Angie Fenimore, loads and loads of people calling out to Jesus or God, you're saved. So Jesus just waits, or God just waits for that, because he won't force you. God doesn't force us, because we've got free will. If we anti-God, he doesn't say he's not happy, but he says, okay, I'm not going to force you, because I give you free will. But directly you say, I want to be with you. Bang, yeah, great. Prodigal son. It's the parable of the prodigal son, isn't it? He turns immediately and says, yeah, come on. That's how Howard experienced it. He was healed immediately, wasn't he? And loved and everything.
So almost, I'm thinking of the passage you always quote, he loved especially those who believe. The saviour of them all, especially those who believe. So the especially bit is one of my questions. So what's the especially bit mean? What's the benefit? But the benefit is, you're saying, not having to be lost for any amount of time, knowing where you're going, and letting him change your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Through this life, so you can experience more in this life as well.
Yeah, and do good, because once you become a conduit for God on earth, you can bring the kingdom to earth. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So if you've spent a lifetime genuinely trying to bring God's kingdom to earth, he's very happy, and you're going to have a good life with you. But if you spent a lifetime anti-Christ, literally, like there's no God, he still loves you, but he's still going to be happier with the life of you, the people who are working for him, rather than against him.
Which kind of takes us to a subject that we're going to talk about next time, which is, what's the point? Like the purpose, the purpose, like that brings you to a place of like, okay, so what's this all about? Why
Yep.
Why are we here? But I
Yep.
think we'll go into that.
That will be good. That will be good.
Next time.
While we're here, because ultimately that's going to put everything together.
I just wanted to read a couple of, because we've read a couple of dark sort of experiences. I just pulled out a couple of because a couple of experiences from this book. Look, I went through the other day just to flag like all the amazing little heaven stories. How many I ended up with. So there's just a couple here, particularly from the children.
Is that Melvin Morse? Melvin Morse.
Yes, this is the one with the MD, and he did a study, a research study. So very scientific. He's quite he's objective on children's experiences. One thing he noted is there had to be real near-death experiences. So it's not about trauma, dreams, visions. That's something different. It's actually that's a real discernment factor I've learned from talking to you. Is did they really get? You can't manufacture. You can't get into a hypnotic meditative state and have these kind of experiences.
This is what's happening. And just come in here quickly. What a lot of people, sadly, they're jumping on bandwagon and saying they've had an NDE, and a lot of them were not. They're visions or dreams. So you've got to make sure, you know, what was that person in hospital? Have they got a medical sheet that they can produce? Were they clinically dead? There's some people who've got their own death certificate.
Yeah. And it's really important for discernment, because visions and dreams, they can be deceptive.
That's exactly. And that's why you've got to be careful and say, I always check everything. And I done a lot of my study way back before the internet was invented, which was good. Betty Eadie was one of them. Howard Storm was the next. George Ritchie. And that was good because it couldn't get polluted.
Yeah.
It was it was easier to study. So now you can be discerning. There's some really good ones out there. I know one guy, he's got massive medical records, and he had an incredible NDE. So I always look to make sure, because that's how the devil gets in.
From twisting them and okay. So this is a 7-year-old boy. Where are we? So he was very sick and he was sort of drifting in and out. Where are we? Shall I start? So when I spoke to Kurt, so this is the guy doing the research, when I spoke to Kurt hours after his resuscitation, he was very much at peace. He knew he was going to die soon and seemed relieved to know that his physical grief was nearing an end. His recent experience, Kurt said, had shown him a world without pain. When his heart had stopped beating, Kurt suddenly found himself outside his body, watching the doctors and nurses work to revive him. He said, I saw Bonnie, one of the nurses present, and I said hi to her, said Kurt. And then everything became dark until I saw angels, and I was in a beautiful place with flowers and rainbows, where everything was white, like it had its own light. I talked to several people while I was there, including Jesus, who wanted me to stay with him, and I wanted to stay there, but we decided I had to come back and see my parents again. I'm not afraid to go back to that place. I tried to get Kurt to draw what he'd seen, but he was too weak to hold a pencil, and he died a few weeks after we spoke.
Now that is good
amazing.
stuff. That is good stuff, because ultimately you've got a child. There's no hidden agendas, everything, and it's all medically verified. So that is really good witness statements. And
the children all seem to. I don't know of any. Well, there's none in this book of any dark experiences with children.
No, I've never known one child who's had a dark experience, which in itself is evidential in many other ways, isn't it?
And the state of that, I guess, again, state of their heart. Yes. And again, Jesus says in the Bible, those of you to enter the kingdom, we need to be like
little children. Yeah, exactly. It's only when we get older that the heart becomes progressively darker in some people, and hopefully lighter in others.
And the head gets in the way.
The head gets in the way. Yeah, it does. Yeah, because you've got the temptation comes in and all the other stuff which we have to battle against. Kids normally are pretty uncomplicated. Thing about them.
And there's another one I've tagged here. Which one? This June had a cardiac arrest at the age of 5. So during surgery to repair her heart valves. So a lot of them are heart issues, aren't they? Because they're
Yes, they are.
seriously ill.
Yeah.
When doctors began their procedure to restart her heart, she found herself leaving the operating room and traveling down a long tunnel. At the other end, she was bathed in light, a bright, warm light that she always described as the light of God. And as she told her husband, Don, I was never afraid again after I experienced the light. I know that I can die any time, and yet I have no fear. And I think I read those particularly because that's kind of, for me, the point of having these conversations, especially in this time. It's like the fear.
Yeah, I'm making a
Fear
shift.
of death is just, whatever you say about any of this, these people have no fear of death anymore.
No, because everybody is scared of death. Unconsciously, even when you go out in the street walking around, 99.9 unconsciously are fearful. They're fearful of death.
And I've always felt, just when I found Jesus and learned about it and read the Bible, I always felt that was the main thing he came to tell us. Like he says, do not be afraid, more than anything else in the Bible ever. And death, where is your sting? And actually like removing that fear is ultimately giving us life.
Yeah, a lot of people have to die to live. I mean, there's quite a few people who have actually died, and they said when they came back that they really, really glad that they had the experience, because it's not until then they actually could live.
And then
they didn't realize they were living in this bondage, of fear. Fear is not good. I mean, it says God hath not given us a spirit of fear. So most people are fearful.
I read another quote. I think it's on here actually. Where's it gone? Oh no, I didn't take. Oh yeah, I did. Choosing life and running away from death are not the same thing. So it's saying that actually living, but yet running away from death constantly.
Yes.
It's not really living. It's not what we've been gifted.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, it's a very unhealthy fear, a very unhealthy fear. But see, this is what's now happened in an atheistic society and secular society. People are trying to fill it with money and holidays and you name it, they're filling it. And in that little time when they get that little gap where they think, oh, death. So they want to push it out of the way. They don't want it. They want to ban it. But everybody's guaranteed. They're going to get it. 100% guaranteed.
So hopefully this can help others embrace it.
Yes, because ultimately no one wants to come back. That's a good point. Everyone wants to stay once they get there. A lot of them have to be told, you've got to go back. You've got to go back. Howard Storm even. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Oh,
I'm here.
I've lost you. Let's have a look. Oh, can you see
me? I can still see and hear you like normal.
You see me? I can't see you.
Oh, I might just pop back if you carry on, because I can see both of us.
Oh, okay. It's weird. Just trying to think why.
Have I just gone black?
No, it's just got a picture of a lady here at a microphone. Obviously not you. Just trying to figure out.
Put my video off and on again, see if that helps. No.
I'll see if Caroline can just pop and give me a hand. Caroline, can you give me a hand, please?
Well, I kind of have one last question I thought maybe, which I could ask you, and then you can just speak anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah, carry on.
To sort of close with, really, was how do you share this good news with someone who's lost a loved one? So if someone's listening now that has recently lost, so my pictures just disappeared, but I can see Rod, Caroline, fine.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening now that has lost a loved one, lost their mother or someone recently.
Here we are, I'm back. Thank you so much.
How did she do that?
I don't know. I always call my engineer in if I've got a problem. Sorry about that. Oh, that's it.
So yeah, so one sort of question I thought it might be nice to end on was, you're obviously talking a lot in your bereavement rescue to
Yes.
people that have lost loved ones. So if someone's listening to this now, most people have lost someone that they really care about. How do you share this good news with them? So what would you leave them with?
Well, I make it very simple, and normally I make it simple intentionally, because when someone's lost someone, they don't want to hear anything complicated.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the bereavement rescue book was made with loads of colors and uncomplicated. If you had a loved one who went to Australia, the other side of the world, a prime example, my grandmother, when my uncle went to Australia and I was only a little kid, them days it took 8 to 6 weeks to get a letter with no internet, and she became ill, very ill over it, and we didn't know it was that. And the doctor came, and my mother was there, and the doctor came down, and my mother said, "How is she?" And he said, "Oh, she's suffering from bereavement." My mum looked at him and said, "No one's died." And the doctor said, "Yes, her son's died as far as she's concerned, because she's believes she's never going to see him again." Now, jumping back, now we've got the internet, that wouldn't have happened so much, because we can do what we're doing now.
Mm.
But if a person went to Australia, like my uncle, and my gran one day was going to get on a plane and fly over to Australia, my uncle would be waiting there at the airport at the arrivals and give her a big hug. That's what this near death is all about. The person will be waiting. You've got to remember, this is interesting really, that the person who dies is only going to be about, using worldly time, about 2 minutes ahead of you, because there is no time. It's like going through a door. One person goes through a door, and the next minute the other person goes through a door, because they're in non-time. It's this side that we get the long gap, because we're in time. It can be 30, 40, 50 years. So the person who's gone is literally not going to miss the person, because the person's going to be right behind them. So I would say to the person that there is ultimately going to be a reunion, and there'll be a party that never ends, because when you go over, they'll be there waiting for you. And pets, all your pets are going to be there. All your dogs, all your whatever pets you've had will be waiting for you.
And what if they were not in a good way, or what if they were someone that might go somewhere else into it? What if they went to a different dwelling place?
I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, ultimately, if they went to a different dwelling place, that again wouldn't be a problem, because ultimately you're still going to meet them again, because they're all going to be ultimately brought to God in the end. Right. So there's never going to be a time we say, I'm never going to see that person again. You will actually, there will be a time where, and when you get over there, remember, your mindset will change, because you may be in bereavement here, but directly you're over there, you're going to know everything. And there's nothing you're going to know. So there won't be any problem. It's all very, very uncomplicated. We make it complicated here because we're very sort of barely conscious compared to over there. We're not really understanding it. But when you get over there, you'll understand everything, and you won't feel hurt. You won't feel bereaved even. You'll be looking forward to them coming. So ultimately,
and you're out of time. So
and you're out of time.
Waiting is not the same as waiting.
No, you haven't. Remember, there's no tears, no pain. It's perfect. Even apples don't fall off trees, and leaves don't come down off trees. There, it's always, and the grass never dies. It's perfection. So you couldn't be unhappy, even if you wanted to be unhappy. You couldn't. Even the most unhappiest person couldn't be unhappy, because ultimately it's perfection. Whereas here, we're back to what we said. We got all this bits and pieces. Some people are nice, some people are not nice, some people are evil. There is perfection. There's no death.
So I guess there's a hope, even by sharing this seed of hope, like that this could be remembered.
Because if you love
someone doesn't change their life from watching this, even if someone doesn't find Jesus from watching this or from whatever anyone's doing, but it's every bit of information, every bit of hope is helping them find their way.
Oh yeah.
And they get the other side, like your Australia story, like you're being lost in Australia story.
Exactly. You always say to people, you've got a plane, your loved one is gone. but you're going to get on that, or not that plane, another plane, and they're going to be waiting for you, because ultimately they're in on time. So they've just turned around 2 minutes, so I might as well wait for them. Ultimately, but we've got 30 or 40 years here, but to them, it's just, you've arrived immediately. So nigh on, everybody is going to be together permanently over there, because they're not going to have the break of time, which we have here. I know it's mind-boggling that. We don't have that big break, you see. We don't have that big break over there. It's only here we can suffer from bereavement. You can't suffer from bereavement on the other side.
Amazing. I love having conversations with you.
Oh, thank you.
It's great. I've got some real clarity on certain things from this conversation again. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
So next week, I think if we sort of finish it there for today, but next time we're going to talk about purpose.
What's it all about?
So what's it all about? Why did we come here? And that's probably enough, really.
Yeah, well, my goodness, yeah, there'll be a lot.
And something, because I was asking Michael if he had any questions, and something that he suggested in that mix is like, why does evil exist? What's its place in that? What's our what purpose do we have, and why is evil existing within that? Yeah,
well, for argument's sake, evil, you've always got, well, in the Eastern religions, you've got the yin and the yang, the dark and the light. So there's always opposition. Every time you've got opposition, for argument's sake, let me say, we grow through the hard times, don't we? We don't grow through the easy times. If I spent a lifetime after coming to Earth, just lying on a beach, being waited on, drinking, oh, it sounds good, doesn't it? Drinking and having nice food, and
it's really tempting.
Yeah. And then I go back and Jesus says, right, let's go through the life review. And he's got a picture of me lying on a beach, having drink and food bought. This, I don't think it'll go down well, but it's just nothing. But if he sees me being perhaps, being hurt, and then having to forgive, learning to forgive, without opposition, if nobody hurt me, I couldn't forgive, could I?
Which I think will really lead us on to the conversation of what is the purpose, because we're getting near it, haven't you? Yeah.
We're getting near it. That's why I didn't go too far in.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because ultimately,
cliffhanger.
Yeah, cliffhanger. Next week or next month or whatever. Yeah. But basically, without the opposition, we'd be in heaven. Yeah. Well, but we're going to bring
talking about the verse, the weeds and the chaff. Is it the weeds and the wheat? The weeds and the chaff. The weeds growing amongst the plants, and then we were, because Michael's obviously has a growing project, so we were talking. He said we need the weeds, like the weeds fertilize the soil. They keep although they're bad, they are essential. And it led into a really interesting conversation, which we can probably go into.
Slugs, we were saying slugs now. They're saying, slugs. And
I know, but I really don't like slugs.
But ultimately, and then you have got an opposition. You've got the Antichrist, which so you've got the Christ light, and you've got the anti. But remember, when Jesus was crucified, the disciples thought it was all over. They didn't know what we know now, obviously, and what they knew afterwards. So they thought, oh, this is terrible. After 3 years, it's all over. And they actually all went away, didn't they? Run away, fearful. But actually, God was using bad to create good. Because by Jesus being crucified, you had the atonement coming. And so ultimately, they couldn't get their head around it because it was terrible. I mean, at that period, for the Messiah to be crucified, it was unheard of. No Messiah would ever be crucified in any known religion, because this just doesn't happen. That's why it proves the Bible is true, because no one at that time would have made the Messiah crucified. Yeah. So ultimately, God made good, because 3 days later, bang, he's back.
The worst.
He's the first of the fruits, he's risen. And so you can see how all this bad was made into good. Because without the bad, we couldn't have achieved the good.
Right, we'll save it, because we're really in the cliffhanger. Okay. We'll finish there. Thank you so much for your time again.
Yeah, thank you, Clem. It's been a pleasure as always.
And Caroline for her story and technical help.
Yep, she's always there in the background supporting.
Right, I'm going to switch off now. I'm going to stop recording actually, and see you in a sec.